They say if you ever find yourself deep in the Appalachian Mountains, never open your door after sunset, no matter what you hear outside, because sometimes it's not a person calling your name, and if you look, even once, you might not see the world the same again. These mountains are older than bones, older than memory, and some believe they remember what used to live here, but what if the stories aren't just folklore? What if the rules people whisper about, don't go out after 6, don't whistle, in the woods, don't answer the voices, are not superstition at all, but survival? There's something about the Appalachians that feels off. Hikers disappear, compasses spin, voices echo where no one stands. Locals warn newcomers to keep their doors locked after dark and pretend not to hear the sounds outside. They follow strange, unspoken rules passed down for generations, and no one really questions why. But lately, more people have started noticing it, like the mountains are changing, or maybe we are. Online forums are full of confessions from people who swear they've heard whispers calling their names, lights moving between trees, and figures that vanish the moment you blink. And the more stories appear, the more it feels like something ancient beneath those forests has started to wake up again. In this video, we'll explore the forbidden rules of the Appalachian Mountains, where they came from, what happens when you break them, and why some believe the mountains themselves are not part of our world at all. Because maybe they never were. They call them the rules of the mountains. Simple, direct, deadly serious. Never leave your house after 6. Never look into the trees if you hear someone whisper your name. Never answer a knock on your door if it comes after dark, even if it sounds like family. And if you see lights moving between the hills, don't follow them, no matter how beautiful they seem. To outsiders, these sound like campfire stories, folklore from bored mountain folks. But locals don't smile when they say it, they mean it. They've seen what happens to people who don't listen. And the strangest part? No one remembers who made these rules first. They've just always been there. So why do people stay? Why live in a place that hums with fear, where the forest feels alive and watching? Some say it's because the mountains give back, that under the fear there's power, old Appalachian witchcraft that runs through the soil and blood of those born there, the kind of magic that heals, curses, and bends nature itself. Generations of families whisper about the old ways. Spells cast with river stones and cedar smoke, charms buried at crossroads, names you should never say aloud. It's a place where faith and fear blur together, where light and darkness exist side by side, and people learn to live with both. Maybe that's why they stay, because for some, the mountains aren't haunted. They're sacred, but sacred things always come with a price. People say the Appalachians are alive, not just with trees and rivers, but with memory. These mountains have seen civilizations rise and crumble long before we ever gave them names. Some geologists call them one of the oldest mountain ranges on Earth, but the locals have another word for them: ancient. Not in the scientific sense, in the spiritual one. They believe the mountains remember, and sometimes they remember us. There's a legend that says the land here was never meant to belong to humans. That something else, something older, has always called these ridges home. The Cherokee used to warn settlers about the hidden ones, spirits that live between trees and watched from behind mist. When settlers ignored those warnings, strange things started happening. Voices echoing from empty valleys, campfires that burned green, animals walking backward through the fog. Over the centuries, people vanished. Whole families gone overnight. The search parties would find their homes, doors locked, food still warm, chairs pulled back like someone had just stood up and disappeared mid-step. No struggle, no signs of escape, just silence. The few who came back, the returned, as locals call them, were never the same. They spoke in half-whispers, like they were afraid someone else might hear. Some wouldn't speak at all, others muttered about the song in the hills or eyes in the river that blinked back. When they slept, they screamed. And still people stayed, because leaving never helped. The ones who left said the mountains followed them, in their dreams, in reflections, in moments when the world went quiet. But maybe that's the point. Maybe you can't leave something that isn't just a place. Some researchers, the few brave enough to spend nights there, talk about electromagnetic anomalies, compasses spinning without reason, GPS going blind for miles, voices recorded where no one stood. One team described hearing what sounded like children laughing deep underground. They left that night and never went back. There's a theory, half whispered, never proven, that the Appalachian Mountains aren't just old landforms, but a border, a seam between worlds that were never meant to touch, a place where the rules of reality get thin, like skin stretched too tight. And maybe those rules the locals follow are not superstition at all. Maybe they're the only things keeping that border closed. Don't go out after 6, because after 6, the day dies, and something else wakes up. Don't answer voices in the woods, because sometimes they're trying to sound like you. And don't follow the lights, because those lights aren't leading you home. They're leading you out. There's even talk of Appalachian magic, not the sparkly storybook kind. It's quiet, old, and heavy. They call it the craft of the hollow, or mountain work. It's said to keep the land calm, to make peace with whatever walks in those forests. The witches of Appalachia weren't evil. They were guardians, protectors, people who knew how to speak to the unseen. And when the rest of the world laughed and called them superstitious, the mountains just listened and waited. Some believe the balance started breaking around 2012, the same year, strangely, when reports of missing hikers and mysterious sounds began to spike. Maybe that's when the border began to tear. Maybe the mountains started remembering too much. Or maybe they just stopped pretending to sleep, and that's when the rules became more than just warnings. They became laws. Because once you hear your own name whispered from the tree line, once you see your reflection blink when you don't, you'll understand. The mountains are alive and they know your name. Every legend has a moment when it stops being a story and becomes real. It started with a man named Carter. He'd lived in the Appalachians his whole life, raised on the rules like everyone else. But Carter wasn't afraid. He said the stories were just to keep kids from getting lost in the woods. He laughed at the warnings until the night he decided to prove everyone wrong. It was October, thick fog, no moon. He told his neighbors he was going hunting after dark. They begged him not to go. He smiled, said, "I'll be fine." He never came back. 3 days later, they found his truck on the side of a mountain road. Doors open, keys in the ignition, radio still playing. The clock had stopped at 6:03 p, and there were footprints leading into the woods, and then they just stopped. Not like he turned around, like he vanished mid-step. The sheriff said it was probably a bear, but bears don't leave perfect circles burned into the dirt. Bears don't whisper your name in the wind when you walk past that road. Locals say that if you stand there at dusk, the same time Carter vanished, the forest hums. Not like wind, more like breathing. Some claim they've seen a faint light moving between the trees, a lantern flickering blue, but if you follow it, it pulls you deeper and deeper until the world starts to feel wrong. The air bends, the sound changes, and suddenly you realize the forest isn't outside you anymore. It's around you, inside your head. There's a woman named Ruth who swears she heard Carter's voice one night. Months after he disappeared, he was calling from outside her cabin, gentle, calm. "Ruth, it's cold, let me in." But when she looked through the curtain, she saw him standing there, smiling, and behind him the trees were moving, not in the wind, like they were breathing with him. She shut her eyes and prayed. When she opened them, he was gone. But in the morning, her porch was covered in footprints, all leading away from the house. They say Ruth doesn't live there anymore, but her cabin's still there, empty. Every so often, people hiking that ridge hear tapping on the windows. Soft, slow, like someone's waiting to be let in. And that's not the only story. A research group once tried to map magnetic disturbances in a valley near Black Hollow. Their radio logs picked up a woman's voice repeating, "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here," but none of them heard it while recording. Only later, when they played it back, the last entry in their log said, "We're not alone out here." Then it cuts off, mid-sentence. The footage was found weeks later, camera half buried in the mud. In the final frame, you can see something behind the trees. Tall, thin, bent backward, watching, its face blurred as if the lens refused to focus. People online say it was just compression errors. Locals say otherwise, because every year, near that same valley, a voice still echoes through the static when you tune your radio to the wrong frequency. It says, "Come home." And maybe that's what the mountains really want. Not to hurt you, but to keep you. To pull you back into their soil, their silence, their memory. Because in the Appalachians, nothing truly leaves. Not the people, not the stories, not even you. You ever wonder why they never leave? generation after generation, born, raised, and buried in the same mountains. It's not just tradition, it's bond. Something older than blood ties them to the land. And the deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. Most people who visit the Appalachians think the locals are just quiet folk, suspicious of outsiders, but spend a little time there and you'll start to feel it too. That silence isn't fear. It's knowledge. They know something the rest of the world has forgotten. Or maybe something we were never meant to know. Old journals, locked away in tiny town museums, tell stories of settlers who arrived in the 1700s and found people already living deep in the hollows. Not native tribes, not anyone they recognized. People who didn't come from any recorded settlement. Their skin pale as ash, eyes gray like fog, speaking in a language no one could trace. And when those settlers asked where they came from, they just smiled and said, "We were always here." Centuries later, families in the same valleys still bear the same surnames, with no known ancestors outside those hills. Their bloodlines start and end within the same few square miles, and somehow their crops grow stronger, their wounds heal faster. Some of them just stop aging, right? Not all at once, just slower, enough for people to notice. Scientists blamed genetic isolation, but locals whisper about something else. The gift. A trace of the mountain itself flowing through their veins. They say those who truly belong to the Appalachians can feel when the land moves or when something unseen passes through the forest, like a pulse beneath the ground, and that's why they follow the rules. Because to them, it's not about fear, it's about respect. Or maybe obedience. See, there's a story most outsiders never hear. They say, long before settlers came, the land made a pact. Not with humans, but with something older. Beings made of mist and stone and sound. The deal was simple. The mountains would feed them, hide them, and in return, they would keep balance between worlds. But then people arrived, they cut down trees, dug into the earth, broke the old boundaries, and the pact was broken. Some believe the people who first settled here were chosen, not by chance, but by the mountains themselves. The ones who stayed weren't trapped. They were kept, bound to guard the rift they accidentally opened. That's why their families never leave. They're not just living on the land, they are part of it. There's an old Appalachian saying, "The mountain takes what it's owed." Maybe that's why every time someone new tries to build here, something happens. Floods, fires, or they just vanish, like the land reclaims what doesn't belong. And if you look closely, the locals never seem surprised when it happens. They just nod and say, "The ridge remembered," then they turn away, as if they knew all along that the mountain wasn't done collecting. But here's the part that chills me most. Maps of ancient rock formations show fault lines under the Appalachians, almost like veins, and some of those lines match perfectly with local burial grounds. It's like the dead and the land share the same heartbeat. So maybe the real question isn't what the locals are afraid of, maybe it's what they're protecting us from, and maybe that's why they stay. Not because they can't leave, but because they mustn't. Because if the last of them goes, there'll be nothing left to hold the mountains back. They say if you dig too deep in these mountains, the earth starts to whisper. Not like wind or roots or echo, but words. Real words. Old ones. You just don't understand them yet. Somewhere under the endless ridges and black valleys, there's something breathing. You can feel it if you stay long enough. Not in your ears, but under your ribs. Like the ground is watching, waiting for you to stop pretending you don't feel it. There's a story, half forgotten, about a mine that reached too far. A coal shaft, somewhere near Harlan County. The miners said they hit a pocket of rock that wasn't supposed to be there. Soft, warm, like flesh. They said it pulsed. When they cut into it, a sound came out. Not a scream. More like 1,000 voices whispering all at once. And every single one of them said the same thing. "You shouldn't have done that." The mine collapsed that night. No survivors. And yet the next morning, every bird for 50 miles was gone. Locals still won't go near the place. They say the tunnels still breathe at night. Some hikers swear the fog that rolls from that valley smells like blood. And sometimes, in the dark, it hums. But here's where it gets stranger. Researchers once tried to measure the acoustic frequencies inside certain Appalachian caverns. The readings were impossible. Tones lower than any natural vibration known. To physics. almost like a heartbeat buried beneath the bedrock. And when they left their equipment overnight, they returned to find every recording erased, not corrupted, gone. Like the mountain didn't want them listening anymore. The oldest families, the ones who've never left, don't talk about it openly. But if you catch them late at night, after a few drinks, they'll tell you the same thing. The mountain has a heart, and it's waking up. They believe that long before humans walked this land, something else did. Something vast and sentient. The land itself was alive, and when the first people came, they didn't settle here. They were absorbed, taken in by the mountain, changed. That's why the locals don't get sick like we do. That's why they dream the same dreams of dark forests and open mouths in the stone. That's why, when they die, their bodies sink faster into the soil, as if the earth knows them, as if it's pulling them back home. And maybe that's why outsiders always feel uneasy here, because somewhere deep down, your body knows you're not supposed to be here. The air tastes different. The trees grow in impossible directions, bending towards something unseen. Even your shadow feels wrong, a half second out of sync. Some hikers report hearing footsteps behind them that stop when they stop, breathing that matches theirs perfectly. There's a theory, whispered only in the darker corners of the internet, that the Appalachian Mountains weren't formed by geological shifts at all, that they're the fossilized remains of something living, something that once moved and maybe still does, just very, very slowly. If that's true, then the people here aren't settlers or survivors. They're cells, living extensions of the organism they call home. That would explain why they never leave, because how can a heart cell leave the body and still survive? One woman, a folklorist who spent decades studying Appalachian magic, wrote in her journal before she disappeared, "I used to think the people worship the mountains, but it's not worship, it's communion. They don't pray to the mountain, they pray with it, through rituals, humming in unison, burning salt, leaving offerings of soil mixed with blood, old magic, older than any religion we know. A contract, renewed again and again. And here's what chills me most. These people don't just fear the mountain, they love it. The way you love something that can destroy you, but chooses not to. The way a flame loves its air. Because for them, the mountain is not a prison, it's a promise. A god that remembers their names, a heartbeat beneath their feet that says, 'You are mine.' Every story has an ending. But what if the Appalachians never got one? There's a theory spreading among fringe scientists, quiet, unconfirmed, that the mountains are not stable landforms at all. That deep under the crust, there's a tear, a rift, where two realities brushed against each other and fused, and everything that grew on that wound learned to exist between worlds. Maybe that's why compasses spin. Maybe that's why voices echo from nowhere. Maybe that's why the locals seem off. Because they're standing right on the scar tissue of the planet. The point where something alien bled into our world and refused to leave. And the earth knows it. The storms, the sinkholes, the tremors, they're not weather. They're rejection, the planet trying to push out what doesn't belong. But the mountains have been here too long. They've rooted themselves into the world's bones. They won't go quietly. Old maps show magnetic lines bending sharply around the Appalachians, like a field being repelled. Satellite scans lose signal exactly over the same valleys, where legends say, the light people walk at night. It's almost like the fabric of reality thins there, stretches, hums, and maybe, if you listen close enough, you can hear it. The sound of two worlds grinding against each other, struggling not to merge again. Some believe that's why the rules exist. The ancient laws whispered by locals. Don't go out after 6, don't answer the voices, don't look at the lights, because these aren't warnings, they're containment protocols, passed down from those who were made to guard the border. The last descendants of the first fracture, the ones who stayed are not victims, they're the seal. And if the last of them breaks the rules, if the last voice calls back into the woods, the seal breaks with them. The mountain will breathe again, and it won't stop. Maybe that's why the ground sometimes hums at night. Maybe that's why the mist glows blue right before it rains. And maybe that's why, when you drive those roads alone, your reflection in the rear view doesn't blink at the same time as you do. Because the Appalachians are watching, waiting, listening, for someone to answer the call they started centuries ago. And when that happens, when the seal finally opens, we won't be standing on the mountains anymore. We'll be standing inside them. And if you ever find yourself there after dark, remember what they told you. Close your door. Don't look outside, and whatever you hear calling your name, don't answer. Because maybe it isn't calling you at all. Maybe it's calling you back. Some say the truth hides in plain sight, others say it hides in us. Either way, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Subscribe to House of 𝘵𝘪𝑒𝑟𝑒s, like the video, and tell me in the comments, what if the thing you fear most has already noticed you?